Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our writing lesson for today. We recently talked about how to grow an idea, and we talked about quite a few different things. Looking back in some of our past writing units to be inspired, how could we take some of this information and turn it into a realistic fiction story? We made some lists of places, everyday places, and maybe some special places to you. And then some other types of events, just even everyday events. Maybe you could even put on here, going to the park. Something like that could inspire a really good realistic fiction story. And then, of course, we added just different people that we might be able to write a story about or be inspired about. So today, we're kind of going to grow an idea part 2. We're going to think about what are some other ways that we can find good realistic fiction ideas. And writers quite often look to themselves to find answers and ideas. They have to search in lots of different places. So this isn't the only way to come up with some good ideas, right? So we're going to make another list today. Let's talk about kind of how writers can find ideas, right? They, like I said, have to search for them in lots of different places. And I want you to think about you as a reader. What kind of stories do you like to read? What kind of books are you drawn to, or stories like with plots that you're drawn to? What kind of events or people do you like to read about? Maybe you like to read about history, or you like to read about a certain type of person. Think about the characters, right? What kinds of characters do you find interesting, right? That you are kind of drawn to. And think about what kind of interests do you have? Right? Do you have some sporting interests? Do you have an interest in a specific animal? Right? Thinking about, I could write maybe a story about that has an animal in it at a zoo, right? Some kind of a realistic story there. So in a few minutes, right, you're going to pause this and you're going to write this down in your writer's notebook, right after growing the idea. So this is growing an idea part 2. But here's how we're going to do it. You're going to write this down. And then we're also going to make a bit of a chart, okay, to give you some inspiration. And we're going to think about creating some more story ideas. And I'm going to share with you some of my ideas. But we're going to create, right, like a window pane. And we're going to put these titles at the top. So types of stories I like to read. So thinking about yourself. Interesting characters. You can see I almost ran out of space there. I had to squeeze that word in. So interesting characters, people that you're kind of drawn to in stories, right? Funny people, people just like you, people that have the same interests as you, right? Maybe some people that you like to read about. So kind of real life people that could be an inspiration for you to have in your story. And then maybe events that you like to read about, different types of things. And I'll show you with my list. But what we're going to do this week is not only obviously share, right, other ways to come up with some story ideas, and you might already know what your story is going to be about. We're also going to talk about creating a believable main character and other characters in our story, but focusing really on a main character. And then we're going to kind of create or construct our story, thinking about that story mountain. There's lots of different ways to come up with ideas, and we're going to work on that this week as well. Okay, so let's focus on coming up with some more story ideas, right? So this is me personally, and obviously I'm a grown-up and you're a third grader. So we have some different ideas of what we like to read in stories. I do love to read kids' books, so that's always a given, right? So the kinds of stories that I like to read personally, I love to read mysteries. I like to read books about friendships. It might be friendships with kids in stories. Like in our class, we just read the story called No Talking, and that was about friendships between boys and girls and can they really be friends? And that was a great story. And things like family relationships, because I'm a mom and I'm a wife, right? And I have kids, so I like to read stories about things that I know about. So these are just a few ideas of things that I like to read. Now, interesting characters to me. Obviously, kind of characters that are like myself, right, that you can relate with. I wrote down women who are professionals, okay? And then I kind of drew a little bit of an arrow. I love to read stories about like reporters or newspaper or magazine editors. I like medical stories when there's doctors and nurses in them. So that's what I meant by women who are professionals, right? People that work outside of the home and that are really focused on doing a very specific job. I could even add teachers on there, right? Because I do know a lot about that. I'm always fascinated with elementary kids because I'm around them all the time, right? Every day for a long time. And I know a lot about them. So I feel like I can always be reading about a character and I can sort of be reminded of maybe some of my former students. So those are some interesting characters that I like to read about. Some more specific people that I like to read about, right? I wrote strong women. So maybe people that have done things like Harriet Tubman, women from history, things like that. Even our own vice president, we've done some reading about her. Okay. Parents, I'm a mom. So I like to read about things that interest me, which is parenting, right? I'm a mom. Mr. Linderman is dad. So and we have kids. So I'm interested in reading about people who are like me. I like to read about relationships and friendships and then relationships with families too. So those are different types of people that I like to read about, right? I could even write elementary kids on here too, right? Because I know a lot about them and I like to read about them. That's why I read a lot of kids' books. We're reading Frindle right now about a 5th grade boy. So I love to read that. And then events that I like to read about. I do love to read about history. I like to read stories about people who overcome obstacles, like feel-good stories. I don't like sad stories. I don't like to be sad. And when I read, I kind of want to be kind of taken away or transported to somewhere different, right? So I don't have to think about being busy or things that are happening in life. And I want to be able to just kind of zone out a bit. So I like feel-good stories. I also like to read stories about school or kids, maybe even in high school and they're getting ready to go to college, that sort of thing, right? We've read No Talking this year in our class. That takes place in a school. We're reading Frindle right now. That takes place in a school. So you can see I'm kind of drawn to some of those types of stories. I also like to read stories where people are on vacation, right? Maybe they're in a big city like Paris. Maybe they're going to the beach or to the mountains, places that maybe I'd like to go, or even places that I've been, like the setting in a book being in Maine. That's one of my favorite places to go. And I love to read stories that are set where I've been, or maybe even where I want to go, or places that I'd like to go, or things I'd like to do. So I love to read stories about vacations and people at the beach. And like I said, people in the mountains on hikes and things like that. So today, what you're going to do is you're going to take and pause and you're going to write this down in your writer's notebook, right? Growing an Idea Part 2. So thinking about you and what are your interests and what types of books and types of characters do you like to read about, right? And thinking about your interests as well. Maybe you're a gymnast, right? So you could write a story that's maybe set in a gym. Maybe you're a baseball player. You could have your story, right, have something to do with a baseball team, or it could, part of the setting could be in a stadium. So thinking about all of these different things. Right? And then you're going to add this chart, just more story ideas, right? That was what the title was, more story ideas. Stories you like to read, interesting characters, people you like to read about, events that you like to read about, okay? And then on this next page, we're going to add one more, and I'm going to grab my marker, and we're going to write about your interests. Okay. One of the things I love to do is to cook. Okay, so I could even write some kind of a realistic fiction story that has something to do with cooking. I mentioned before that maybe it could be something in a bakery, right? Or maybe it could be a restaurant, it could be part of the setting, or it could be a chef, something a person that would be in a story about cooking, right? Could be a chef. I watch a lot of Food Network. I don't know if you'd watch that at your house, but I love to watch cooking shows. Thinking about your interests, right? I like to do gardening. I'm not very good at it, just getting started. We have some small little container gardens in our backyard, and we did it last year, and I fell in love with doing that. So something about gardening, that's one of my interests, right? Maybe you like arts and crafts. Maybe it's some kind of a sport, right? Or something that you like to do in your free time, some kind of a hobby. So think about what are some of your interests, and could you use that as inspiration for coming up with part of your realistic fiction story? Okay. So remember, you're going to be writing all these things down, how to grow an idea. You're going to create yourself a chart, and then you're going to make yourself a list of the different interests that you have that are specific to you, right? Maybe you like to collect stamps or rocks or something that's really important to you, right? That could be part of your realistic fiction story. All right. Have a great day. Remember, once you get these pages done in your writer's notebook, you're going to be sending pictures of them to your teacher so that we can see, not so specifically on here, but what your lists of things are and how you are being motivated and inspired to write your realistic fiction story. And then during the rest of the week, we're going to talk about how to write about believable characters, and we're going to start mapping out our realistic fiction story.